Thank you so much for the warm welcome and thank you for the invitation today. I feel very privileged to be given this opportunity. This is my first collaborations workshop, so it's been really nice to see some familiar faces and meet some new people. So it's been lovely so far. I'm sure today will be good as well. I was invited to give my perspective on strengthening the research software community, and it kind of immediately made me think of all of the invisible work that I see going on that creates the spaces we need to talk and collaborate across communities. So it's sort of how participating in that, which has shaped my career and got me to where I think I am now, but maybe unintentionally kind of along the way. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about and talk about how I feel like my trajectory has been accelerated in a way that wouldn't have happened without all of the community building work that I sort of stepped up to do just because I found it interesting and I found a passion in it. At this point in my career, I'm kind of looking forward to see what happens next. And then that's making me look backwards to see how much that work has grown into being part of my formal job. From conversations yesterday, I get the feeling that a lot of people here will kind of relate to how important it is to participate in these kind of things, but also maybe relate to how it kind of can unintentionally shape what you do. So that's what I wanted to talk about, how it quietly shapes a career. Oh, okay. But first, obviously, I thought I would introduce to you why I'm here and why I was invited. So I wanted to go through my sort of career journey, which I've cutely sort of done as a road with these intentional turning points, not just pretty turning points. But actually, my road in some ways has been completely straightforward because I started at EPCC and I'm still at EPCC. So there's not a lot of changes there. If you're unfamiliar with EPCC, we're part of the University of Edinburgh, home to the UK's National Supercomputing Service, which is kind of the main thing that I get involved with with EPCC in that kind of way. That's a strange way of phrasing it. But my job existed because Archer 2 was coming online in 2021. So in 2020, I joined as an applications developer, joining the team that does the user queries and training and service improvements. So I did that straight out of university after my degree in theoretical physics in August 2020, starting at EPCC in October 2020. 2020 was a terrible time to start your first ever job, but it was quite exciting because of Arch 2 being switched on. So I kind of felt this like excitement around the field and a sort of breadth of fun research and opportunities that I could see coming my way in the future. So a couple of years go by and I've picked up a couple of different projects outside of just the CSE team, user support team. I've done some visitor support for HPC Europa 3, which is technical support for Arch 2 and Cirrus. I've worked on some price projects, and now it's time for regrading, and I got regraded into an applications consultant. That feels like kind of a natural progression of the role because you're kind of building your expertise and building your confidence in skills. It's kind of feels like a natural step. In 2023, I kept building up these responsibilities and these projects. And because I was now an applications consultant, I had more access to, I guess, more interesting projects where you have more of a impact on where they go and the sort of technical design of things. I worked on it was kind of a doomed project, attempting to GPU accelerate HemoCell. We were seeing if we could sort of implement C++ offloading in a very, very minimal way to see if it made a huge impact. It made a very little impact, but it was interesting to try anyway. And then I did an AI project looking at the efficient use of hardware and sort of approaching it from a sustainability point of view. And finally, looking at something around future hardware for CFD, what might the next perfect supercomputer look like for a CFD workflow? Are they ready for GPUs? What about other fun accelerators? This was quite a blue sky thinking sort of project. Very interesting. And this is kind of my full formal technical project history at EPCC. So I've done sort of short form projects with the CSE team along the whole way. Uh, and what I wanted to talk about with this is that I've kind of just followed my interests. I haven't sort of tunneled into a niche or a technical identity in many ways. So, for example, I haven't like become a quantum expert or a C++ expert or anything like that. I related a lot to one of the lightning talks yesterday, which talked about curiosity-led career development, and I think that's pretty much what I did. I just followed what I found interesting at the time. Now we're in 2025 and regrading is open again. The next step up is for a project manager or an architect. And this is definitely less of a sort of natural career progression, I would say. I think you need to have, there's a strong focus on leadership, organization and planning, communications, mentoring, outreach, that kind of thing. And maybe just sort of following your interests isn't really enough to demonstrate that you've got there and you're ready for that next step. However, there's pressure because of the uncertainty around university finances, which I think a lot of people in this room probably relate to. It's kind of unknown whether regrading will be open in the near future. So I want to put myself out there, but I'm worried about this lack of a technical niche or technical identity. However, at this point, I sort of looked back and looked at my community building work, and it became a really key factor. I'd kind of felt like it was a separate thing that I was doing on the side, just sort of something that I was interested in. But actually, by 2025, it had become completely shaped who I am and what I do as my career. So that was kind of my reflection point to look back at that. So that's what I kind of want to talk about now is go back to this point in 2022 and where my community building stuff sort of fed in and started to shape what I do. So in 2022, RSECon is happening again. My role in Arch 2 doing the user support is technically an RSE role, I think. I'm not, I know that this is kind of one of the challenges with the RSE that it's really wide. So I was encouraged to like look into this community, see what other people are doing. And when I saw that opportunities to volunteer were happening, I thought that would be a really fun, low pressure way to get involved and get to know people and attend a conference. It really was. I really recommend it. I stepped up to be the volunteer chair. So my goal was to recruit, organize, and lead the team that were doing kind of the on the ground conference logistics. So the registration desk, the cloakroom, running around waving a mic like a headless chicken, a Slido, all of that sort of stuff. And this was my first sort of role like that, my first leadership style role. It was a really supportive, welcoming community, and I would really recommend getting involved. The call for volunteers is open now, I believe. So if you do want to, this is a good first step into community building, I think. And then later on that year, I was lucky enough to attend SC. So EPCC were excited to sort of sponsor people to go for the first time to see the wider community. If you're unfamiliar with this conference, it's one of the largest global HPC conferences. It happens in the US in November every year. It's where a lot of cutting edge research is presented. There's a lot of global representation. So institutions from all around the world are there, sort of championing themselves. There's loads of vendors, lots of major announcements like the top 500 supercomputers list gets updated there. And it's a huge conference, so 11,800 attendees in 2022. It's really fun, very cool to experience. But I felt really out of place and very unprepared for such a huge environment, especially because in 2021, only 14% of attendees and 8% of the authors were women. So, as well as being early career and a little bit low confidence and not maybe ready for this kind of thing, I was often the only woman in the room as well. But this is actually where I discovered the Women in HPC community. I went to their workshop and I felt sort of this comfortable, belonging, inclusive space where I felt like this community felt accessible to me and like I could participate in a meaningful way. And that's where I've kind of identified this turn in the road, because that kind of is where I picked up all of these other responsibilities. So this is one of my main passions. I wanted to introduce it to you all. Women in HPC was founded at EPCC in 2013, so it's kind of bizarre that I had to travel to the US to discover that they existed. But it has a mission to support women and underrepresented groups to pursue a career in HPC. It's broadly speaking about building a community that celebrates different voices, different role models, highlights the importance and impact of equality, diversity, and inclusion, and works towards getting everyone to appreciate and empower building this inclusive and welcoming community. One of the main ways we do this is the chapters and affiliates. Women in HPC is actually a really global network. We have 33 different local community groups all around the world. I think we're technically in 6 continents because one of these affiliates is Middle East and North Africa. So it's a little bit of a dip into it, but I think it still counts. And these are great because as someone in Edinburgh, I can't possibly understand the day-to-day challenges that someone in Taiwan is facing, or someone in Australia, or someone in Germany. So all of these groups provide that sort of connection into a local community, understanding the local challenges, and then building up those tailored support networks that really make a difference in people's careers. Here's a list of those in the UK. I would really recommend getting in touch and getting involved with these. They can be a real difference to you feeling like you can sustain this long term and that you have that connection to people. And we also do representation and visibility at events. So this is a regular programs where we give spaces for early career people to have their voice heard, to network. We provide them with mentoring and travel funding, and that opportunity just to engage with new people and take that next step in their career. As well as that, we do fun things like Diversity Day. You can see me in a pink t-shirt that was Barbie themed, incredibly controversial, but it really got our name out there at that conference. And this is really what I benefited from in the first place. This sort of visible community, familiar faces, that really did make all the difference to me feeling included. So that's a little bit of an intro to women in HPC. I love talking about this. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come chat to me. But really, I just wanted to highlight that because it's grown into a really huge part of my career. And that's why I've kind of symboled this turn in the road, because I believe that all of my experiences sort of came from that and that realization that I could give back to a community like that. So when the next event came round, which was ISC in Germany, which is kind of analogous to the SC, it's kind of the European version of the American conference, but quite a bit smaller. Anyway, I decided to step up into a new role. I became the mentoring chair, so I was looking at the support of people attending a conference for the first time, helping them prepare for that experience, navigate the community. So that really aligned closely with my motivations, and I was really, really pleased to have that opportunity to step up. But now the sort of free ride was over. I couldn't go to a conference without having a good reason to go to. So my line manager provided me with this opportunity to become a speaker for a Birds of a Feather session that was happening at the same conference, so that I could build up this sort of case to be able to travel to go. And this is where another one of my lot of sustaining engagements has come from, if that's the right phrase, which is working on growing this outreach ecosystem. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with outreach. Outreach is how we connect what we do to the wider world, share what the real world impact that we're having with on society is, and attracting new talent. So making sure that everybody who we need to provide their diverse perspectives into our field feels welcome, able to enter the field, understand what we do. And this is all about sustainability. We can't do what we do without having new people joining and new people staying. We can't do what we do without getting funding. And with sort of the news around AI and things like that, it's really important that we showcase the benefits of this and not just sort of let the doom scrolling take over people's opinions of our field. A lot of people think outreach is around sort of giving a small child like a really fun interactive activity to do, and then that's it. But actually, this is much broader than this. It's all about the general public, students entering the workforce, researchers in other scientific fields, and those very young learners as well. It's not straightforward. We have really complicated, unfamiliar ideas that we're trying to communicate to people who have little to no background in this. So we have lots of fun things that we do. I've included some pictures on the side here. So EPCC does VR tours of our computer rooms. We have microbits, which we teach people how to program. And we have this quite infamous ball sorting game, which always gets adults and children engaged alike. But each of these activities have to be adapted, tested, and refined for different audiences and different contexts. For a VR headset, if you're explaining that to an adult versus a child, your explanation is really different, and that might not be super straightforward. But these activities are happening all over the world, similar contexts, similar audiences, but our efforts and our activities are developed in isolation often. We usually duplicate what we're doing. A lot of people are trying to communicate the same concepts. Similar activities fall out of that, and they're reinventing the wheel over and over again. So our goal for these international conferences, where the community is gathering, is to discuss and share these ideas and build this more sustainable ecosystem to help people to keep this going, removing that barriers to participation, I guess, and like reinvention of this wheel. So we've done sessions around designing new activities, building these reusable frameworks, and how to document something so that someone else can easily reuse it again. Also things like science communication. So how can you distill your very complicated research into the key things that someone needs to learn to be able to sort of understand and meet you where you are? Behind the scenes, this group that organizes these conference events is a really global collaboration. So we have Australia, South Africa, Mozambique, Czechia, the US, and we have this really beautiful, like wide range of perspectives that helps us to design and deliver this outreach so that it is truly inclusive for everybody. So that's what I kind of stepped up to do. This was my first involvement at ISC 23, but since then I've taken on sort of a more organizing role, and I'm now leading these activities to help with sort of sustaining the engagement and continuing the efforts going forward. It feels really valuable. I've been able to meet people, build networks, all that sort of thing. 2023, another opportunity comes around. There's a call for volunteers to join the Women in HPC leadership. Someone's going on maternity leave. So I decided to step up. It feels quite a unique position to be at EPCC. I'm able to sort of integrate straight in because there are some other colleagues at that time working on this. So this is a role I currently still do. I'm supporting the onboarding and the guidance and shaping this growth of the international network. I love this part of the job. It's a real like strong personal connection, direct and helpful impact into all of these other people who are trying to build up the community. So it's providing that support. And yeah, I still do this role now. So then I'm sort of going on to build different responsibilities. I'm going through the conferences. I'm sort of taking on things that are new because I've learned what's going on before. I'm showing this progression through the career. Another Women in HPC hat. So this is, I'm trying to sort of demonstrate how things can sort of get piled onto you because you've sort of grown this voice. People know that you're in the field and you are, I guess, you're ready to take on new things. You're really keen to keep it going. I was very, very keen to sustain Women in HPC and make sure that we can keep doing everything that we're doing. Volunteers were having to step away because they're moving on to different phases of their lives, phases of their careers. And I'm keen to keep this going. So I became the treasurer. I'm managing the sponsorship income for events and leading budget and financial planning. It's also an opportunity to learn something new. I didn't think I was going to be doing anything financially related when I stepped into a HPC career. And then another one I've started, another volunteer stepped back, and I'm now leading the formal partnership for ISC, managing the overall planning and the logistics, recruiting and supporting a new team of volunteers. It's exciting. It's a chance to shape our impact at a major international conference. And I'm really keen to, sustain and grow this and make sure that this work happens. So this is where I'm symbolizing another bend in the road. I've been growing these responsibilities, adding them steadily. Each isolated instance makes sense, and I can understand my thinking of why I've picked them all up. And because of that, I've managed to get a reputation, and people are aware of me. I'm visible for this sort of passion for community building, and it's something that I enjoy. So I was invited to develop a proposal on community and knowledge exchange. For me, it felt like an opportunity to sort of share and scale what I've been doing. So it felt like a really useful thing to get involved with. And this is the Cake Project, very cutely named, but it's quite an interesting problem actually that we're trying to solve. So we're all part of the UK digital research infrastructure landscape. It's really broad, it's complicated, and it's evolving. So there are the DRI programme investments that have been made by UKRI, but actually this landscape is a lot wider than that. We have sort of the research infrastructures, the platforms, the people supporting that, all of the experts in our field, all of the communities, and all of this comes with many, many opportunities that we can all get involved in. So things like training, events, community activities, funding schemes, but sort of more indirect than that, someone somewhere may have solved the problem that you've been working on for 20 years already, but you haven't got that connection to that other community. So that's kind of what we wanted to solve. It can be really difficult to see what already exists, who is doing what, and how everything connects into all of this. So Cake exists to try and make that landscape easier to navigate. so that you can spend less time searching and more time collaborating with people in the field. We do this in kind of three main ways that I'm going to highlight today. The first of which is just creating this single place to explore the DRI community and get involved. So this is kind of your basic project website in terms of things like social media, a blog post, a mailing list, all of those things that you can do to get involved with Cake. But we've tried to explicitly connect this to the DRI community. So you can go to our website and discover the landscape, have a look at the projects, the people, the activities. We've kind of mapped that out on our website, and we're actually working on a specific map that's going to be released soon, where you can see the connections and see how all of these projects actually connect and what institutions are involved and where all of these collaborations are happening behind the scenes of these projects. We also have a calendar so that you can see the upcoming events across the whole landscape, not just Cake. And then funding opportunities. So this is all about having all of the relevant information in one place so that you can scroll through, find the best thing that works for you and your project and your work. We're also trying to solve the sort of how do we do this. So we have a knowledge hub called Cakebox because we have to keep the puns going. You're lucky I don't have pictures of cake on this slide. Usually I would have quite a lot of puns going around. This is a hub where we're storing like best practices, reusable guidance so that you can sort of pick up and get going straight away without having to do that sort of blank page syndrome part. We have a couple of different themes on there. It's designed to grow, so if there's something that you want to host and signpost, we can definitely sort that out for you. At the moment, it's things like ready-to-use resources. So a code of conduct, if you need one, we have a template, terms of references, outreach templates, all of this sort of thing to help you document what you're doing and share it more widely. And then finally, Cake also has some funding opportunities that are explicitly focused on supporting knowledge exchange and growing new collaborations. So we have fellowships, placements and visits, and retreats. I'll talk about the top two as they're the open calls. So the fellowships is all about connecting communities together and strengthening knowledge exchange in sort of a specific area of the DRI community. So we have 3 fellows that are in the first cohort. The call is open for the second cohort. So if you have an idea, this is a really nice time to sort of start exploring that. The communities at the moment are Fortran, so Joe Woolwork is here somewhere, and he's one of our Cake Fellows. He's over there. So if you have any questions about being a Cake Fellow, I'm sure he'd be happy to have a chat with you. But so the Fortran Index, he's had a lightning talk yesterday and a workshop on Monday, and that's kind of what the Cake Fellowship is enabling and helping to support. We also have Kubernetes and a community of practice for leaders as well. Then we also have the placements and visits. These are an open rolling call, so there's something that you can apply to all the time. There's no specific deadline. And this is all about exploring those new collaborations or sustaining existing ones. So this could be national or international, virtual or in person, sort of that opportunity for you to go and visit someone and explore where your overlaps happen and what you need to do to sort of get this collaboration going. Okay, so that's a little bit about Cake. Again, if you have any questions or you'd like to sort of workshop some ideas with me, I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you about that. Otherwise, go check out our website and sort of make sure that your funding and your project and all that kind of thing is represented on there so that other people can find and collaborate with you and figure out what your work is all about. So this is where I've symbolized another turn in the road because now community building is formally part of my career. Before all of this, everything that I was doing was kind of something that I was driving with my passions, and now it's officially part of my sort of day-to-day life. It's 50-50. So when regrading is open again, I am ready because I've had this community building work sort of representing all of these leadership, organization, communication. It's giving me all the evidence that I need to be able to be regraded into that role that I wanted. So I became an architect. And this is kind of what my job looks like at the moment. I have sort of this mixture, it's a happy mix of technical, creative, people-focused stuff. And community building is what enabled that career move, I think a little bit earlier than if I hadn't been doing any of that. But I can't help but think where this goes next. So my community building responsibilities have grown basically due to limited volunteer capacity and me being sort of in the phase of life where I'm happy to step up and I've got that sort of privilege of a little bit of extra time and passion to be able to do this volunteering activities. There's a clear scope to keep expanding. EDI has, just in itself, just thinking about that one pocket, has so many ideas, so many gaps, but there's real time constraints around time, capacity, and support. And I really feel like if I wasn't managing it, my career could 100% become community building, which is completely valid. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's not what I set out to do in the first place. And I want to keep this technical balance, and I can feel that kind of drift happening if I don't manage it and if I don't try to actively maintain that balance. But it's kind of hard to say no. And I think this might be something that other people relate to because community building feels really important, but your technical career feels really important as well. And it's kind of, they're both competing for time. And one of them is kind of easier to take on than the other one. I think that's a wider pattern, as I said. This community-led work often becomes the essential infrastructure for research communities. So we're enabling the spaces where people can connect, collaborate, and support sort of shared progress as a whole community. But this is often carried by a small number of people. It's often under-resourced, and it's really difficult to sustain because of that. So that's what I kind of want to talk about next. I want to talk about this sort of structure that's supporting everything underneath the work that we are doing. I want to talk about what makes our community strong, who's doing that work, and how we can change how we support this. So first I thought, what makes fundamentally a scientific community stronger? I think we have this sort of shared purpose. Everybody feels passionate about what we're doing. There's clear goals, there's ownership that's sort of driving this engagement and accountability to make sure that the field is successful. We have diverse perspectives, so making sure that we have all of these different backgrounds and skills so that our ideas become creative and robust and more impactful. We have support and recognition, so resources, time, acknowledgement to sustain that contribution and keep things growing and keep careers like sort of happy and balanced. And we have open knowledge exchange, so inclusive sharing and challenging ideas. I think from the keynote yesterday, one of the ideas was so interesting that we need more spaces to sort of argue with each other. I think that's completely correct, having this sort of space to be able to challenge what's happened before and make sure that what we're doing is sort of progressing in the right way. And all of this together comes with strong technical practice, effective collaboration, long-term sustainability. This is something that I believe is truly essential. It's not just something that's nice to have. This is all about the diversity building up our community. It strengthens our thinking, leading to more creative and impactful ideas. And we need to have the support structures in there so that everybody can be open with each other, supportive, and we have that space for those perspectives to sort of buy into this. Stronger communities produce better research, better work, and better outcomes, and give us a better daily life where we feel more included and more connected. And what the infrastructure enabling this is, I think, is all about the chat platforms, social networks, terms of reference, codes of conduct, the active efforts that are sort of pulling everything together, making sure that everybody has sort of this space to communicate. This doesn't happen by accident. Someone needs to be intentionally maintaining this, reviewing it, and making sure that everything sort of lines up with what we actually need and what our priorities are at the moment. If we don't have this, people aren't connecting, knowledge isn't being shared, isn't being built on, and this sense of belonging doesn't develop. So without these, our community is toppling. So I wanted to look at this in our context. So we're the research software community. I think our purpose broadly, people may disagree with the overall purpose or think I've missed something, but we're supporting the full life cycle of research software. And that includes like the ideas, the development, the maintenance, supporting it going forward, and then the people who are behind all of those different stages. And I've tried to make a list, which I think is actually what people might disagree with even more, because I'm sure I've forgotten things, because this field is huge, it's super diverse, so many different roles, so many different skills are needed to make sure that this community is strong. And then in between all of these different things, there's cross collaborations, there's so many different ideas that are shared between all of these, so many different smaller disciplines that are underneath all of these umbrellas. So, what is our infrastructure? How do we connect across this sort of vast landscape? And how do we make sure that these cross-cutting, cross-community discussions are taking place? I think this is through this network of initiatives and groups that sort of are out with our universities and our institutions. So the working groups, events, special interest groups, committees, initiatives like Women in HPC and the RSE groups. All of these make sure that we can discuss EDIA, sustainability, and career pathways with all of these different ideas feeding in. So by having these discussions, we're able to bring these key topics to like the surface. We're able to include a lot of different disciplines and institutions and ideas and cut across them. And we make sure that we have the sort of governance in place so that people can inclusively and openly contribute. But what's happening with the structure? Where is the time, resources, and recognition? I think the people who are driving this is often started and sustained by volunteers. And the volunteers are the people who are seeing the gaps in the community. They feel the sort of impact of those gaps. And then they step in to create those spaces that need to change. And I'm looking at these as sort of people having this driving passion to take time out of their lives and sort of squeeze their like formal contributions or formal work roles so that they can fit this stuff in. For example, Women in HPC is all about EDI and a belonging in the community. The Society of RSE is all about recognition of a vital career path. Green initiatives about climate and sustainability, something that feels like very connected, especially into high performance computing and sort of the environmental impact of that. But something that is maybe out of our control and requires community input to talk about. Also, software maintenance. So you may have worked on a code for 10 years and then the funding's gone. Are you going to just let that sort of code die in a corner? A lot of people are going to work and put the effort in to keep that sustainability up. All of that's volunteering. All of that is sort of driving this infrastructure forward. This is great. We need our progress to be shaped by lived experiences. We need our voices to be central to the conversation. But the challenge with this is that it can become very exhausting. Volunteer driven means that it's already on top of stretched roles. There's no protected time. There's often maybe little formal recognition. It might be indirect recognition. You are building these really valuable skills up, which I feel like my career has 100% benefited from. But the trade-off is that the time that you're spending on doing that could be spent publishing papers, writing coding, developing your technical skills, engaging in core research work. So there's this tension between a passion for sustaining the community that you feel is really, really essential and you can't do your job without it, or do you progress your individual career? I think that's where this invisible cost is coming from. We have all of this additional work. It's often emotionally driven by lived experiences and a desire for change, something that you feel so passionately about that you are going to create that space to do it. But ultimately, the progress is kind of slow. So the pool of active volunteers is, in reality, often very small. Most of the time goes to maintaining the infrastructure. So as simple as sort of maintaining a Slack community, which is not simple because you're constantly bombarded by lots of different people's questions, lots of like maintenance of the back end and things like that. It's all of these sort of invisible little tasks that all compound into this one huge job. After all of that, there's little capacity for new, even high value initiatives. So something that you feel really passionately about can feel like it's kind of missing out on some impact and some real value that it can provide to the community. This work is visible when it succeeds, but the effort behind it is largely invisible. And then the visibility as an individual tends to bring more responsibilities and more opportunities. So you can say yes, great. You can take on these opportunities, maybe really great for your reputation, all that. You risk overload, you risk burnout, you also risk drifting your career away from maybe another passion that you have. At the same time, though, saying no is so difficult because what if no one else is going to step in? And what if that work then doesn't happen and the passion that you have doesn't get progressed or doesn't get talked about at an event? So this is where we end up. I can't believe I found such a like relevant image, like people holding up as pillars. But this is what we end up with. We have this community because we've had individuals who are willing to step up to build and maintain and hold up this infrastructure. And we're all benefiting from the opportunities and the spaces to connect and share this knowledge. But the majority of the work is still sitting with a small number of people. And progress is still slow as overburdened people have limited capacity for impact. They're spending all their time on that infrastructure. And the demand, which from the community, people are really interested to hear about EDIA. They really want to make a change in this. But that demand is exceeding the available support and the available capacity that people who are doing the work have. So we're really out of balance, and we need to change how we support this work. But it's not all bad. The work has long existed within these structures that make it hard to get involved and then hard to stay involved. So our issue, I think we can all agree, our community is incredibly passionate. So that's not our issue. It's not a lack of passion. It's how we are supporting it. And I think there are a few signs of change. As I say, I'm still quite early career, I feel. So these are kind of things I've noticed that seem to have changed since I've joined the field, or I seem to have come into my sort of perspective, I guess. Things like dedicated roles like community managers, they're becoming more expected and established in funding projects, I think. The Network Pluses and the skills hubs are all about supporting community formation, and they're providing things like fellowships and flexible funding that give people sort of the opportunity to show your employer, look, I've brought in money, this issue is really important. We're also having some like changing workplace cultures around allocating time. I know there's some RSE groups, specifically that's the examples I've heard, which sort of allow you to have 5% to do personal development or community development. That doesn't really solve the issue of coding versus community building, but I think it's still a sign of change. So we need to move this work from extra to essential. But whilst keeping our voices sort of at the center of this community change, we need to make it supported and visible. And this is just a slide of some of the things that I think I've learned along the way that individuals can sort of take part in and do. So first, I would like you to look at the communities you're part of and look underneath them. Look at who's holding that together. How is that work being supported? And what could you do to improve it? Make it visible, so either that for someone else's contributions or for your own. You can talk about your community work in meetings, in annual reviews, document all of your contributions, showcase the value that it's creating, and try and document the value growing as sort of you move through this field. And then make it count. So community building work is essential skill building work. We are very rarely sort of sat in a dark room coding 100% of our job. We often are teaching, training, talking to people, collaborating, and these are all sort of essential skills that you can build through community building. So make sure you name those skills, and then that can help you to build your career whilst you're giving back. So as much as that's great, we're making this work visible. We're increasing individual participation by sort of learning what's going on and the opportunities and the skills that you can build to further your career. We also need the systems to change to help us recognize and fund and protect this work. Otherwise, this responsibility will still fall on a small group of passionate people who are carrying the burden. So I'm not sure how we solve this problem. I think broadly we need to have it recognised in careers, having protected time for it. So not just 5% for community, for personal development, but specifically for something that you're passionate about that will build up others as well. Funding it properly and sharing the responsibility. Okay, so looking back, community building has definitely given me skills and opportunities that I don't think I would have had access to without sort of stepping up and wanting to put myself in that position. It's been really fulfilling. I enjoy this varied career. I enjoyed the creativity and the interesting things I get to do. I think it really suits me as a person, and I've been able to sort of carve that balance that I quite like. But the scale of the work is huge. It can be really isolating, and quite a few people still seem to take it on, and the work sort of gets overburdened quite quickly. But this work is vital. It is something that is shaping our career. It's not separate from our career. It's shaping our community. It's shaping our research ecosystem. So we need to recognize it properly, support it better, and make sure it becomes something that's sustainable rather than quietly carried by a few people. So thank you very much for listening.
Right, we'll move on to the questions. There's a few questions online already. You can see the QR code on the slide as well, so please feel free to ask your questions or upvote any questions that are already there. Um, Let me begin with a question, and it is also on my screen here. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I think it aligns a lot also in the keynote we had yesterday and builds a lot on that. And one thing I know Malvika really cares about, and I associate the concept with her, I'm happy to attribute to her, is you mentioned a lot about volunteering in your career and how that sort of opened up opportunities that you were in the end able to formalize with this sort of 50-50 division in sort of community building allocated within your main role. So there is a question of how can we incentivize that allocation? You touched on that in some RSC groups, you have that 5 or 10% where people can allocate to this community building. Because one of the things that I know Malvika and others care a lot about is this volunteering really relies also on the privilege of time. So people having the opportunity to do that volunteering outside of their job or having very supportive line managers who say, you can do this as part of your main job, it's fine. And I think there's also an element with that volunteering that you say, people are passionate about these certain topics. Often they're the people who are most affected by those issues, and then the burden of solving those issues is sort of put on the people most affected by those. So I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit about your career, how you've been able to manage your main job with that volunteering, and how you, in the end, managed to incorporate that as part of your main job, and what you could maybe advise to others about that.
It's quite a hard question because I think I kind of sort of have made a lot of mistakes along the way. I think I've definitely fallen into the pitfalls of taking on too much and then not really having enough time and having to work extra hours, but being driven by the fact that I was feeling really like it was important and essential work. And I think the kind of sad thing in this way is that the way I got time at work is because I did it first. And then it became expected and as part of my role. And then people didn't mind that I had less time to do something. There was more flexibility in that, which is something that I think is fundamentally needs to change because it shouldn't be that someone has to step up and sort of feel that passion to do it and participate anyway, squeezing everything, becoming stressed, and then it kind of alleviates because you've sort of grown that recognition in that. Um, but I do love the idea of this sort of 5% in your time or 10% in your time by default for you to maybe. I think the way it would work best is if you had to pick proper projects. So, this is my goal. In my annual review next year, I will report back on this progress and I'll show you that I've sort of contributed to this community. It's been worth this for me. It's been worth this for the community. I think that's sort of how we sort of take that going forward to actually build it into people's careers and build it into progression because you can show actually what value you've done without sort of doing it on the side and sort of panic squirreling away, but making progress but feeling stressed about it and like that sort of weird balance there.
Yeah. No, and I think you talked a little bit about the trade-offs there as well of, really doing this work instead of publishing papers. And I think if it put it in there, then the time dedicated to either professional development or community building, maybe you should have both or just one dedicated to community building. So it doesn't affect it. There's one more suggestion for a pancake knowledge base as well in the chat. I
I've heard
think
that one.
if you want to keep the puns going, I think that's one suggestion I want to share here as well.
I've heard that's good for like world because of pan. So we could have pancake and expand it even further.
Yeah, no thing. So thank you for that suggestion. And then I had a question about what advice do you have for people who are offered roles that are entirely new to them? Like you're talking about the women in HPC treasurer. And it could be good for their career, but it's an unknown and difficult to know how much time it will take up.
Yeah, I think this is one of the maybe the mistakes I've made along the way. I don't want to call them mistakes because I think they have all contributed and sort of given me skills and opportunities along the way. But it was something completely alien to me, and I felt like it was an opportunity that was interesting to take, something brand new. I'm always kind of keen to learn new things, but I think it was also a lot more work than I expected it to be. So my advice to people would be to kind of take the time. Don't necessarily, you're allowed that time and that thinking phase to actually properly think about it, explore it, and not just sort of gut reaction go, oh, I really care about this. I actually really want to do it. I think taking a step back and actually thinking, okay, when would I do this? What can I move? What's it replacing? That kind of thing is really important. It sounds really basic, but it's something that I didn't do when I first got involved with this kind of thing.
Yeah, and from your presentation, I can also see how much things you were involved in, and there's a constant like,
Yeah.
I went into this and I did this, and oh, I took on the chair role there, and that shows an incredible passion. But I think there's also a risk there, and maybe you can share something to talk about that, about burnout, like taking on too much, and maybe that follows on the previous question where you have this sort of idea of a growth mindset of I can, grow into this role. You don't have to have all the skills before you start something. You can,
Mm.
with the right support, maybe get into that. Maybe that's something you can touch on as well. But it is also that risk of burnout, especially in the context of volunteering, of extra time on top of your day job, how to manage that, your private and your sort of work life. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just touching on the not having the skills when you first start. This is something I think people are hesitant because volunteering tends to be something that maybe you've not encountered before because it's not a direct technical thing, or maybe you're a nervous public speaker or something like that. I think this is a great way to get into it. The nice thing about volunteering and getting involved with these communities is that everybody you engage with will be someone else who's really passionate and will be really supportive. They will be probably someone who's got quite a lot of ideas and things that they would like to get done. So by you stepping up, even if you're like, oh, I actually have no idea how to do this, I don't have the skills, they will not mind. They will help you and they will sort of give you that opportunity to learn and grow your own career. So if you're ever feeling hesitant about that sort of thing, I really wouldn't, because these communities are sort of the places to go to do that, I would say. But in terms of burnout and sort of managing your time, I think that's tricky because it's kind of something that happens too late. You almost realize too late that you've got too much going on. Um, so I would say the other thing I have to say on that is that you may feel like you have to do it, but you do not. If you feel like you're being overburdened, if it's important to your employer, they will help you to support other people. I've sort of expressed this to my line manager before and said, I actually feel too entangled in this. I don't know what I would do if I had to change jobs. And she was like, it's not your problem. Like, someone else will help you deal with it. I think it's having the confidence to sort of step up and say, I am too out of my depth. I don't really know how this has happened, but I've got too much going on. And it is your support networks around you, formally with your job and with your the other people who are involved in your volunteering things, who will help you and help to disperse that. So I know that's not a perfect solution because we're still sort of working with this small capacity of people, but on an individual level, that's how you deal with it, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's also related to you talked about passion. So, and passion sometimes is linked to responsibility. Like you feel like there's a
Yeah.
responsibility to take this on, and if I don't do this, then
Yeah.
and that responsibility can become a burden when it's you driving it. So,
Mhm.
one of the things that I've had in discussions as well is share that responsibility early on with
Yes.
others, because it actually helps them to grow into those roles. And they might not be confident enough, but sharing those roles and those responsibilities actually improves it. Um, Now, sort of coming back a little bit about that topic of protected time.
Mhm.
Um, it's great, and I think we're advocates for it. But do you have any advice for people in the room who would like to go to their line manager or go to their institution and start that conversation, how to approach that. How did you manage to approach it or create that?
So I don't actually have protected time. This is a what I do for cake. So this is kind of where my tension comes from, I guess, because cake is community building, and my the team there value women in HPC and value outreach, and I think are very happy for some of that work to be absorbed there. And then my work for Archer 2 was absorbing women in HPC work for a long time because it's kind of aligned with the funding streams and all that, because that's where EPCC sort of founded women in HPC. And I think travel and that sort of thing for women in HPC came from the Archer 2 budget. So my time has actually not been protected, it's been implicit. Um, my employers know that I do it and they're happy for me to do it, but ultimately I have the same responsibilities as other people in my team. Which is why I didn't realize that this protected time was starting as sort of something to grow. And I spoke to a couple of my colleagues at different RSE groups around the UK who said that they are starting to get this sort of 5% formally in their schedules to preserve it for something. EPC are very happy for people to do these development projects, but we need that 5%, I think, in your schedule to show that that is protected time. I have half a day. I mean, it's not a lot of time. I do have half a day once a week to be able to dedicate to something else like this. If I was going to go and approach to start that conversation, I do think that this sort of embedding into meetings or annual reviews is the way to do it, because we can track this engagement and you can track your growth and you can report back on it. So then it becomes something that is seen as a contribution. It's something that's measurable, which is always difficult to do with this kind of participation. Um, and yeah, I think that's how I would do it, is sort of to ask for this 5%, ask everybody to take on a little project that they think they can do in a year or however long, and then see how that sort of goes over that time.
Yeah. And you already touched a bit on that, because there's a question there about measuring that impact and the community building.
Mm.
And I know it's a big topic at this conference, at these
Yes.
few days. Community building, everyone here in the room, I assume, is like, yes, that's important and it is essential and it's holding up everything. But how do we start quantifying, qualifying it? How do we start measuring? What are some of the metrics? I'm not asking you to give. If you could give the answer, then we can all just have lovely discussions the rest of these days. But so I'm not putting you on the spot to give all the answers, but maybe it is useful in all the work you've been doing in all the different roles, if there are particular things that you can identify that, as you say, you are now recognized for community building. So is there something that you've shown that had an impact or something like that that then got noticed by leadership and made you that sort of person that people go to for community building?
Um, So I think the way I built sort of a visibility is by taking on the speaking opportunities, which I think is a quite a small part of this infrastructure idea. And it's also something that not everybody is happy to do. I mean, I definitely was not very happy to do it a couple of years ago. I sort of forced myself to become a little bit more comfortable with it. I think measuring impact is really, really difficult because, as I say, most of this infrastructure is actually all this hidden stuff. So it's things like building up a LinkedIn so that people can learn about what you're doing. It's about maintaining a website and maintaining the text that's there and building documentation and all of this sort of stuff that I think is really hard to measure the impact of, because it's kind of, it's not there, now it's there. I'm not sure who's benefited from it. Um, so I think that's really tricky. I think what you can do is do your own personal documentation of what you've done. Write down everything that you do. Something that I've kind of learned along the way, the hard way, is to write onboarding documentation as you go, and as you learn something, write it down so that someone else can learn it a little bit easier the next time. Uh, I think all of that should be used as measurement of impact, but I'm not sure how realistic that is for like leaders and things to take as impact. Because yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure how to do that.
Yeah, and then one little question before we go to the end. There's a lot of, I think, interest and I hope people have that conversation, this question here about these frameworks, career frameworks, about recognizing this kind of roles. And there's some examples there of, dedicated time by RSCs. There's
Mm.
careers frameworks here by UCL, but in the chat by Jonathan that mentioned. Um, and I think one thing that stands out for me in those maybe and in your talk as well is community building might be a bit of a strange term yet. That's not fully understood. People starting to understand it. But one thing that universities have sort of clearer criteria around is outreach, and there's quite a lot of outreach in your work. Do
Mm.
you feel that some of the community building work framed as outreach is sort of a path of defining or maybe broadening the definition of what is outreach? Because it's when I talk about outreach, when you see you talk about outreach, and we know we've had discussions about difference between outreach and knowledge exchange, and
Yes.
do you feel that maybe there's an opportunity within these careers frameworks to broaden the concepts of outreach to knowledge exchange to community building that provides a path of least resistance into getting these into career frameworks that has some knowledge or some frameworks that leadership would understand for promotion?
I think that's a lovely idea, actually. I've not really made that connection before, but I think outreach is a lot easier for an institution to see direct value from because often it's kind of like, hello, this is who we are. You can come give us money or come and work for us or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think translating sort of the benefits of collaboration into a sort of outreach terminology to show that we're bringing in collaborations by building community is a great thing. I also think, just to come back to some of the other questions, uh, becoming visible in a field and sort of demonstrating that what you're doing is promoting your employer is also a really useful thing. It's very simple, but you're getting your name out there, you're doing really great work, and they are sort of benefiting from that indirectly because someone else might say, "Oh, that's a nice place to work. Eleanor works there," or something like that. So that's another way to get sort of career progression is to demonstrate outward facing connections.
Yeah, and it might be that institutions like EPCC become sort of recognized as great supporters of certain
Yeah.
communities of practice, like
Exactly. And
with.
that's also why you should be shouting about it and getting career promotion from it because they're getting progression. You need to get it too.
Well, that's a lovely, lovely note on the end. And thank you very much again for a wonderful talk. And do come and talk to her about cake at Women HPC. There's lots of things as you've seen in the presentation. And yeah, thanks again.